I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker. Marie-Claude Arguin is currently our Director of Strategy and Architecture with IT Services here at Queen's, so she's a proud Queen's employee. She's had, I'd say, a very interesting and long and distinguished career. She's traveled all over the world since graduating from RMC. She has built up expertise in crisis management and change management, and this specialty, I think, really served her well in the role that she played around the tragedy at Lac Megantic, which, as many of you know, is one of the great tragedies that's happened in Canada in modern times. We'll hear quite a bit more about it, I think, over the next hour. As somebody who works in energy and in energy services, this is one of those truly humbling lessons about what can happen when things go wrong. As always, we will be taking questions after the formal talk, and we will be doing it both in person and through Slido. So if you have Slido on your phone or your device, you can also pose questions that way. So please join me in welcoming Marie-Claude to the podium.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My reflex is actually to bring the mic down, but I don't need this time. And I might move around because also short stature, you may only see my head, right? So again, thank you for inviting me here. Thank you especially for giving me the opportunity to actually share the many lessons learned that we've gathered around managing the tragic events that took part on 6 July 2013 in the quaint little town of Lac Megantic. A few spoiler alerts right here from the get-go, I must say, is the first one is you've already noticed. Despite the numerous effort, and I'm really trying hard to get rid of this French accent, it just doesn't seem to want to go away. My apologies. So sometimes some of the words, I don't put the emphasis on the right syllable. I know. Please bear with me. And then every once in a while, I invent a word that I truly think it's an English word, and it happens not to be. So if it happens again, I apologize in advance. My biggest challenge for this is I've given a similar presentation several times. It's never been under 90 minutes presentation. I have so much material to share, so much lessons learned to share with you. So it was a bit of a challenge to try to find the right messages and the right lessons learned for you. So I might seem a bit rushed a little bit more at the beginning when I talk about Lac Megantic itself, when I talk about the tragedy. But I'm going to try and rush a little bit more at the beginning so I can have more time for what I would call the meat of the presentation, the most important part about the actual response to the tragedy, the actual crisis management. And I for sure want to leave time for questions at the end. So how I've managed to actually structure this presentation in order to try to provide you with as much important information as possible is I'm first going to talk about Lac Megantic. This is not like touristic marketing, but you'll see there's still a little bit of it. My heart still belongs in Lac Megantic, and I think that'll be quite clear. I'm going to put you in a context, right? If I'm going to talk about the crisis management, if I'm going to talk about the role of all of the public administrators in Lac Megantic and how to deal with the aftermath of that tragic event, it is very important that you actually understand and that I be able to put things into context. So I will try and do this for you by showing you a short video. Then we'll go into, again, what I call the meat of the presentation. I will be talking about what can we expect as public administrators? What can we expect when we have to face such an event? And it's not because we actually have learned it in theory, I've learned it in books, I've learned it like through experience, that we can expect it, that we must underestimate all of those important things. But then I will also go, and I would argue that this is probably the most important part of the presentation, is I will also share with you what are everything that I could have never expected that I would have to manage and I would have to live with, right? So those are lessons learned that if you are unfortunately having one day to deal with something like this, even on a smaller scale, then perhaps you will remember Marie talking here, and then hopefully what was the unexpected to me will be the expected to you. And then I'll give you my little peace of mind or opinion, personal opinion about how to navigate through all of those challenging issues. And again, that's the last spoiler. Like, I've looked, maybe it was a mistake, because it kind of created like almost a tiny little bit of stress. I looked at the lineup of speakers that come here normally, those who came before and those who will come after. So this is not like manage your expectations. This is not an academic presentation. This is not a political presentation. This is 100% homemade by Marie, speaking from the heart, leaving you the messages that none of them are actually supported by science or official research. This is like Marie all the way. So a few facts about Lac Megantic. So it's roughly 540 kilometers away from here. So, 5.5 hours straight drive when there's no traffic. There's probably a pointer here, yeah. So Kingston here, Lac Megantic. The line you see here is actually the border with the United States with the state of Maine. So we are exactly 39 kilometers from the border of Maine. So it's still beyond me as to why I couldn't speak a single word of English at age 16, being so close to the United States. But as you can see, this is approximately, maybe you can't see well on this map, but this is approximately the closest town. So I guess this is the answer to my question. My closest American neighbor was a forest. It's pretty much a one-way conversation when you try to talk to trees. I specifically chosen that pictures. I could have picked so many of them, but when I decided to talk to you a little bit, very shortly about Lac Megantic, to me this picture says it all. It's a tiny little town nestled between mountains and water. So this is a downtown that was destroyed with a tragedy, and then you'll see later on. This is a mountain here, but if this was a 360 degrees topographic map, you'd see that there are mountains here as well, and mountains here as well, and here is the extremity of the lake that continue all the way there. So that town is right in the middle of all of it, and as you can see, at the bottom as well of all of it, and that will explain the train derailment. Lac Megantic, many people also are not aware, but I thought this was of particular importance or interest to talk about today, being in a university where put so much emphasis onto research. Lac Megantic is home of a very important astronomical observatory where tons of high-level research in astronomy and astrophysics are taking place. So many of the research that's actually taking place in Lac Megantic are actually directly contributing to many of the NASA initiatives. So we are very proud of this. In addition to the research that's happening in Lac Megantic, we were the very first international dark sky reserves, 5,200 square kilometers of it. So for those of you who were potentially born in a large city and never lived anywhere else than in a large city, if you want to know what my version of a sky is at night, travel to Lac Megantic, and you will just be simply amazed. Millions and millions and millions of stars. So this is about I could have talked obviously for a long time about Megantic. You know, people in Lac Megantic, because you've seen the map, right? We're kind of towards the end of the map. So people like to say that because we're actually located at the end of the Quebec map, people don't pass through Lac Megantic. People go to Lac Megantic, right? So this is somehow why people say that why there's not that many people. Well, I, for one, believe that there are endless good reasons to travel to Lac Megantic, even if you don't just by mistake pass through it. So consider this as an official invitation. Now I'm going to provide a bit of the context. If we could please stop videotaping here.
On va avoir besoin des échelles de la ville de Sherbrooke, Saint-Georges.
So as you can see, the more it goes, and it's only minutes. Now he keeps expanding. He's asking for more help.
Affirmative, je vais demander l'échelle de Saint-Georges-de-Beauce, ainsi que l'équipe de la ville de Sherbrooke.
Les pompiers, c'est on rentre dans le feu.
So essentially what happened here is, as you can see, before the fire chief actually truly understand what was happening, it was so big, of such magnitude, that immediately he called 911 and said, like, let's call the general. The general in 911 terms is like, we're calling everybody we can. So it made sense to the 911 agent to actually call support from the villages and the towns around. But what you may not have heard correctly here is, like, when he started asking for Sherbrooke and asking for Saint-Georges and asking for Quebec, you have to think that this lady sitting at a desk or at a phone somewhere, she doesn't see what he sees. And then her reaction was like, what? You're asking for, like, trucks from Quebec City? And he's like, yes, I am, right? So I'll talk about this a bit later. This is a lesson learned in terms, like, this is just about the 911 experience. But think about when we actually called Ultramar and we started to ask them to actually dispatch, I'm not sure we say this in English, like fire extinguishing foam. And then when they're asking us, like, well, how much of this do you want? And our answer was like, everything you have. You mean everything we have here in this? No, everything you have, we need it. Again, they're like, who is this person, right? So anyway, so I'll come to this a bit later. Now, often people are asking me, like, well, why? How did this happen? So this could be like an entire half-day presentation. I'm not going to get into the details of the technical investigation about what happened in the accident. But essentially, what happened is that, as you've seen, right, the picture, Lac Megantic is at the bottom, is, you know, at the lower level. And in about 11 kilometers upstream, is where the actual train was actually parked for the evening, for the night. The actual train was coming from the States, and it actually stopped at that city called Nantes. And then, as per normal procedure, the driver actually put on the brakes and actually left the train unattended and then went to sleep. Well, something happened with the hydraulic system overnight, and essentially the brakes malfunctioned, and then that train started going slowly forward into motion on a downward slope on a distance of 11 kilometers. So when it hit the downtown of Lac Megantic, when it's actually the first very important sharp curve, it just didn't take the turn. At that point, the estimated speed of that train was 100 kilometers per hour. So a few facts about the tragedy, continue to put this into context. Well, you've seen it from the video, the magnitude of it. The one thing that I couldn't give this presentation without talking about is like the enormous wave of generosity and solidarity that we got from everybody. We actually, like you've seen, like our closeness to the United States, we had like fire trucks lining up for kilometers and kilometers from just about every city surrounding. We actually got offers from over 200 fire departments across the province and including the United States. It's like outstanding in terms of response, but then as a public administrator, at one point what you really need to start thinking is like, how are we going to manage all of these people? Where are we going to put them all? Like, who are going to give them their commands and their orders and all of that? So at one point, we had to stop at 125 fire departments. Still fairly large amount of firefighters on the ground. But then we figured out that this was as much as we could actually manage logistically. The other one, and then I specifically chose that picture as well to give you a bit more about the tragedy. The train that actually derailed was almost 1.5 kilometers long. It weighed 23 million pounds, or 11,000 metric tons. That train consisted of 5 engine cars, 1 buffer car, and 72 tank cars filled with unstable crude oil. That today is no longer authorized because of Lac Megantic. I chose that pictures because it shows a very typical mushroom cloud explosion. Of the 72 tank cars, 63 of them exploded when they derailed. Every 63 explosions created a mushroom cloud like that one. That picture is taken from the side of the lake, no more than a kilometer from the actual explosion point, from where my parents' house is. So you can imagine at like 1:20 in the night, being woken up with all of those sounds. My parents did not know that this was a train that's exploding. My parents, maybe it's because at the time I was serving in the army, I'm not sure, but they were convinced that this was like Third World War. They were convinced that they were being bombarded. The only question that they could not answer was like, why Lac Megantic, right? Why us? So every mushroom cloud like this actually represented about 1/15 of the explosion power experience of Hiroshima, just to give you an example. And then, because this was crude oil that exploded, some of it burnt into the air, as you can imagine. Most of it actually followed the law of gravity, and it started like spreading into the soil, into the ground, and much of it actually started borrowing all of our underground canals like water and sewer canals. This was actually determined to be like the worst North American environmental oil spill on hard surface in history. And last thing I want to talk about the tragedy itself. Again, this picture was actually chosen on purpose. Hard to tell on the screen here, but I'd like to point your attention to the 2 people at the bottom. This is a couple of elderly people. Again, you can imagine their confusion and their fear when they left. Over 2,000 people were immediately evacuated that night when it happened. That's more than 1/3 of the entire population of Lac Megantic. They needed to go somewhere. Most of them actually left their home like in a hurry, like in pajamas. Many of those elderly people didn't even have like dentures on or anything like this. It was like, get out of here, we don't know what's happening, but we need to save our lives. 100 residents burnt down. Over 100 business got shut down immediately because they either burned or they were no longer having access to them. 39 buildings in the entire downtown survived, and I'm doing this on purpose because I'll talk about this later on in the presentation. They survived the fire that night. But most tragically, as most of you must have heard, 47 people died that night in Lac Megantic, leaving 30 children that either lost one or both parents. This is a picture taken quite a few days after. It's taken from quite high view, but what you can see here are all of the tank cars that exploded. The train arrived from all the way up here, and this is the curb that I'm talking about, that at 100 kilometers per hour just couldn't take the curb. So all of the explosion happened here. You can see all of the black burnt soil here. This was so hot that it immediately burned everything. It's following like towards the lake, so the slope goes towards the lake, and you can actually see the oil here in the water. And then I want to point your attention to here, those 39 buildings that are still white in the picture that did not burn down. I'm pointing your attention to it because I'll come back to it, and it's going to be a very important portion of the presentation. So the response. At the beginning in my introduction, I told you that I would tell you, well, it's normal, right? Especially for me with my background in crisis management, there are things that are just like second nature. There are things that you know that you're going to have in emergency management to do, be it a small or a large emergency, right? So first thing, of course, command and control. It is of the utmost importance that as soon as you can, when something like this happens, you first find a place to meet, and you first gather all of the people that you need, And most importantly, you make sure that the roles and responsibilities of everybody that's around the table are very clear. What was very not clear, or I should say was very clear to the city at that time, but was either assumed or misunderstood by a lot of, I would say, maybe higher officials, this was so big that we had like government people coming to join us to provide support very quickly. With the greatest intentions, these people came to say, we're going to take control and we're going to manage this situation. When you are in public administration, when you are the mayor of a town, whether it's small or it's large, you are accountable to call emergency. You are accountable to manage that emergency. So the mayor and the public administrator, city manager of a tiny little town of 6,000 in southern Quebec needed to get a grip, like we say, put their pants on and tell our government supporters, thank you, we are so glad you're here, but we are in charge here. Report to me. We're a little 5'2" person. Normally I sit like this, report to me. Around that table, just an example in our case, but it's obviously situation dependent. In here, obviously, you don't want to have 30 people around a table either. But we had, of course, people from communications. We have the police that was there because, you know, it was a criminal investigation because people died there with an accident. Was it done on purpose? Was it not done on purpose? We did not know. So the provincial police was there. A fire department, of course, was there. Public safety was there. Environmental was there. One of the things that made that tragedy so unique still today, it's not because it was so big. It's not because people died. That tragedy and that accident is not more important than any other tragedy that happened on the planet. Not at all, that's what I'm saying. That's not at all what I'm saying. What was unique in our way is that it never happened in the province or in the country. So people did not know how to deal with this. This is a train that derailed. Who's responsible? Is it Transport Canada? It killed people. It happened in a city. Now we have this huge thing to manage. Is it municipal affairs? It spilled oil. Is it maybe the Ministry of Environment? You know, we're going to have this huge psychosocial aftermath to deal. Is it maybe Health Ministry? Et cetera, right? So we didn't know, and quite frankly, we did not know, and all of those ministers did not know either. So all we needed to do very quickly is to all get around the same table, clarify the roles, and say, hey, nobody knows how to manage this. Let's try and figure it out together. And that's what we did. A second thing that you need to expect when you embark on such an adventure is that you're going to have a lot of volunteers and emergency response worker. You need to take care of those people. You're going to survive through this situation because of these people are there right by your side. Again, that picture specifically chosen by moi because forever and ever, this is no marketing, they don't know I'm telling you this, but forever and ever, all of my charity money nowadays goes to the Red Cross for that personal reason. These people, what happened is like one of the volunteers of the Red Cross was one of the person that was evacuated. As soon as she got outside her house, she actually saw the magnitude of this and she's like, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm pretty sure Red Cross would eventually have to come down here. So with her personal cell phone, she actually called like what I will call her chain of command to Quebec City and essentially just described what happened. They did not wait for public safety or anybody to tell them to go. 2.5 hours later, a 53-foot trailer arrived with the big Red Cross sign on it, and we gave them access to a high school, and they started setting up the shelter. So all of those people that were being evacuated wouldn't have to wait for before daylight was even in, that shelter was being set up with very highly generous people from the Red Cross. The other thing that I also want to mention is you have to be very mindful and careful about who you will call your heroes. Everybody is a hero in those situations. Everybody. A lot of emphasis, a lot of cameras were put onto our firefighters, rightfully so, right? They are true heroes. I can tell you this. But when we do this, we tend to forget the other people. We couldn't have survived this, or we couldn't have the success that we had without the involvement of many heroes. Be they all of the volunteers and citizens that actually came to our new improvised city hall and essentially said, how can I help? I'm going to operate your call center, for example. All of our admin assistants or office workers, went for months, they worked like round the clock. They did not go into the fire, but they left their family behind, and they were working like 20 hours, 7 days a week. They are heroes too, right? Our public works workers, I told you at the beginning that the oil actually burrowed like underground canals. In the very first few minutes, my potable water technologist from his home, the first thing that he thought about is like, I have to protect the lake and the river. I have to protect the potable water wells. He actually left, and it's still like, even me, I didn't know. It's like, truly, in 1913 at the time, we still have to do this? You actually have guys going down the manholes, shutting down the valves to make sure that whatever in those pipes doesn't end up in the lake. Unfortunately, as you have seen, like some of that crude oil ended up in the lake. But if it hadn't been for those very courageous, and again, everything is exploding. Those metal tops of those manholes, they're popping all over the place, exploding. Yet, I have guys that went down there closing the valve. Those are the heroes that did not receive medals. Those are the heroes that, rightfully so, some of them today are still living a different kind of nightmare, right? With the psychological aftermath that comes with it. Lastly, but not the least, what's very important and is to be expected is communication. In a situation like this, you have to communicate, communicate, communicate. You have to be transparent. You have, again, this is for those of you who may have followed the news way back then in 2013, this was our mayor at the time. If you think I'm short, remove about this from me. Tiny little energy person. She was the mayor of a town of 6,000 people. She did not know how to manage that. But she understood very well that as the mayor, she was the face to the camera. She was the one communicating to the citizen. She was the one the citizens were going to turn to actually get information and get answers to their question. So our job as public administrator is to make sure that we leave our mayor the place, we leave them the place in front of the cameras, and we are the people behind in support. We need to make sure they have the right information on time. We need to make sure that they say it properly. We have every press conference, there were 2 press conferences every day, one in the morning, one around dinner time. Every press conference, despite the fact that we're super busy, we practice before all of them. Practice, practice, practice. When she went there, she had a strong face, she was strong for our citizens, and they knew they could count on her. And that's the role of the public administrator, because she was a victim too. She lost personal friends as well in that tragedy. It's her, that's the town she grew into. She's also affected, but she realized that she just could not show that weakness in front of the camera. So communication, be transparent, communicate everything you can. It is better to say, I don't know. We're working hard in trying to find the answers than not communicating. And then there's reality. Why I call it reality? Most people think that in emergency management or in crisis management, the beginning is the most difficult. It's actually the easiest. The first couple weeks, the first 2-3 weeks, it was intense. We didn't know truly what to do, but all eyes are on you. All support is there. Everybody's coming to help. You know, a city of Quebec, without even us asking, sent us their communication expert to support our mayor, right? You know, and it's all about surviving. There's no limit. We're there and we're trying to feed people, to lodge people. It's intense, there's no time to sleep, but it's relatively easy when you come to think of it. What's difficult is the emotional management. But the actual action is not so hard. But then it's normal, it's life, it's reality. These people slowly, one by one, go away. They have to go back to their own life, right? Then you're kind of left to yourself to manage that aftermath. And it's actually after that it gets a bit more difficult. So again, this could have been a presentation for like another half day, but I picked three things that are really, relatively simple that to me, every time I faced them, I was like, if you would have asked me what to expect, this would have been something I did not expect at all that I would have to manage. So there are dozens of those examples because after the first phase of the emergency management, it's all about managing the unexpected or managing the unknown, right? So I only picked 3 for sake of time. The first one is, to me it was about making sure people were lodged, people were fed. To me, in my head, it was like very simple, quick steps. Extinguish the fire, clean up downtown, move people back into their places, get back to business. 4 simple, 4 phases, go. Did not quite happen that way. Turned out that there was a criminal investigation. Turned out that the police actually came and put like fences all around the downtown. Nobody, even us, were allowed inside. This is like we're in charge of the crisis management, but not the criminal investigation. So people have answers. At that time, we have people missing. People are looking for their children. They don't know if they were downtown that evening, but they haven't heard from them in 2 or 3 days. Are they dead? Are they not? Are they there? Have you found them? We don't know. So having to deal with the criminal investigation certainly is not something that I had thought that I would have to do. These people are looking for bodies, so very emotionally difficult as well. You have to find ways of supporting those people, right? Very important. I'm going to look at my notes because I'm pretty sure there was something important I wanted to say and it's not coming to me. No, I said it all. And then, well, that one. The criminal investigation, you don't expect it, but once it's explained to you, you're like, yeah, it makes sense, right? I understand. This is not my sandbox. This is not for me to manage. This is not my expertise. I'll let you do your thing, and I'll try to be patient as much as I can. But then the criminal investigation is completed. Then we're in charge. Then we're back to my step 2. There's no more fire. Now that step 1A of that criminal investigation out of the way, okay, I'm back to business. Let's clean up so we can go back in. Well, we started cleaning up, and then that contamination was at least 10 feet down, at minimum. The more we dug, the more we found. We needed to get rid of that. I don't know if you can see, but we ran out of room. We dug. At one point, we had 190 trucks leaving our downtown every day for weeks to bring that dirty, contaminated soil elsewhere. At one point, people were like, well, wait, I don't want your dirty soil, right? What's in there, actually? So at first, again, it's kind of easy. Everybody wants to help. After a while, they're like, well, wait a minute. Can we breathe this? Is this going to make us sick? So then we end up digging, making our own piles, and we actually ran out of space. So we had to come up with creative and innovative ideas in how to actually do soil management. Not something I learned at school, but something that we had to do. And then we ended up getting tremendous support from researchers from all over the country. So we actually built we did testing. So we actually built soil platform, decontamination platform, and in 4 different one of them, and we tested different ways of decontaminated. One was biological, one was chemical, one was just natural, and then, so we're glad to say that in the end, this provided very good research data for future events like that. And then, well, I've talked about the 39 buildings. Well, those buildings did not burn, but all of the basement, they had at least 6-7 feet of oil in the basement that came back inside. So you couldn't even go inside those buildings without a mask. And then we had to pump that water, because again, my step 3 was like, once it's cleaned up, we go back inside, right? So let's clean those pavements. Let's pump that oil out. Again, where do we put that oil? So we came up with our own pool downtown, municipal pool, where we actually, as soon as we were pumping the oil, again, like thousands of liters a day, and we actually pumped this into that homemade pool, and then again, with innovative ways to actually filter that oil and then bring it back to actually clean water before we send it back to proper locations. But we had this humongous pool filled with oil at one point where you could not even like walk nearby without a mask. And then the last few messages before I close. Certainly what I learned about my experience in public management is that it is so easy to read and to say that your role, the role of a mayor and his or her team, is to make hard decisions for the greater good, is to make hard decisions for the collective good. So easy to say. But I'll show you again, I picked 3 examples of very hard decisions that the administrations of those days had to take. And I can guarantee you that this is probably the hardest thing that they had to do in their lives. First, about zoning. Well, when you hit with a crisis or a tragedy like this, one of the good things is that the province and the country grant you like special powers that you would normally not have as a municipal manager or as a mayor. So what happened here is like we got like special power to rezone our city for a few months the way that we saw fit. So those people that, those business that ran out, like I told you, want a few days or a few weeks, once they actually say, okay, well, I'm good. I'm fed, I haven't lost anybody, I think I'm good to go, I feel okay. Now my priority is to get my business back on track. So on their own initiative, and we cannot blame them for that, on their own initiative, they actually found new places because they knew. You saw the pile of dirt. It took us 2.5 years to decontaminate. The experts were telling us 5 to 6 months at the beginning that it would take. It took 2.5 years. So when that started to become obvious that it would take a long time, that we would not even know when we would be able to go back in, then those business owners said, well, okay, on my own initiative, I'm going to go find myself a place for reopen my business temporarily. So they went. Of course, they could not come. This is a downtown that burned. So they went way up here at one extremity of the town. They went down here at another extremity. And they started making deals with people. So these business owners would come to us really happy, really energized, and be like, I have good news. I can reopen my grocery store. I made a deal, and I just bought or I'm about to buy, or I'm about to sign a lease with the Mazda, how do you say this? Dealership, thank you. Mazda dealership, and I'm going to reopen my grocery store there. And then others say, I'm going to reopen my pharmacy. And then they all start lining up with their plan. And then we're like, at first, awesome, we're happy. But then we started thinking, wait a minute. What's going to happen after that? They're going to establish themselves over there. They're not going to want to move again, most likely, because it's a lot of energy, time, and money to do this. And then at the end of it all, once this is finally cleaned up and ready to move back in, then we're going to have lost our city heart. We will have lost our downtown core. We will be spread all over the place. So what we did is and again, everything I'm telling you, I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do, is what was decided to do at the time, is that we chose to use our special power to rezone everything around so these people would not be allowed to actually reopen their business out there. So can you imagine how bad we must have looked to them? I survived this tragedy. I want to reopen my business and you're saying no to me? Who are you? Right? Who do you think you are? Not easy. It certainly took a lot of courage. It certainly took a lot of competencies. When you are in those roles, you need to know what you can, what you cannot do. You need to be able to justify those hard decisions with articles of law, with specific things, right? Most of these people are still in the emotional, they're not in the rationale. You need to be able to try and make decisions outside of the emotions that are happening. You need to think further down the road. You need to think for the greater good. So that was a very hard decision that the administration of the time chose to do. And now, 2019 today, there's a new downtown core. Same picture, but you'll notice that change the name here. Well, if we could not go back in there for at least a couple of years, if we were blocking everybody to go elsewhere, for our own economical survival, we needed to offer them options, alternatives. If we're saying no to them, then where are we sending them? How can we think about our future? Are we ever going to be able to go back there? Is it really realistic to think that we can ask people to temporarily relocate and then come back once it's cleaned up? Should we not instead think about a way to how to actually redesign our downtown core in a permanent way, differently? Should we not seize that as an opportunity to try to rebuild better? So what we ended up doing, second decision, very hard, that I certainly did not expect I would have to do when I got city manager of Lac Megantic, is we went to knock on doors. And we went to tell people who were just simply happy and blessed, felt blessed to have survived. And now we told them, again, with a specially granted power that normally a municipality wouldn't have. We gave them a piece of paper and we said, you need to leave. We're going to demolish your home because it's going to be our new downtown. Again, I was not people's favorite friend at that time, right? Very difficult to do. You have to be supported by a bunch of people, friends and family, and expert in that matter. You have to support these people. You know, like I don't want to pass the wrong message. We don't go there and tell people and then close the door and say, okay, one done, we go to the next. We need to make sure that before you knock on those people's door, you have the right psychological support in place. You need to make sure that you have the right programs in place. These people need to be compensated, right? So there are a lot of things to think about, but certainly 3 days after the tragedy, the explosion, the last thing I thought was that I would be expropriating like dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And last but not the least, this is by far the most difficult decision that the administration of the time had to do. And that's why I pointed your attention to those 39 buildings. After 2.5 years, after several calls and letters to just about every financial institutions of this country, about phone calls and letters to just about every insurance companies of this country. When I would ask them, I said, we've been pumping oil out of these basements for like over a year. Nobody lived in those buildings for over 2 years. Yeah, we kept them warm in the winter, but can't promise that there's no mold or anything like this in it at the moment. But soon we will be able to actually tell the owners of these buildings that they can actually go back home. Can you guarantee to me that you will continue to insure them? And if so, will it be the same premium rate? Can you guarantee to me that you will continue to honor their mortgage? Nobody told me no, but nobody told me yes, right? So at one point, we're like, well, what do we do? These people are still in a very emotional state. All they want is to go back in. We cannot prove that this is like fully complete. We cannot, nobody's going to guarantee me that after they move back into their homes, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, they're not going to develop a cancer because they've breathed mold or they've breathed like former like oil, fumes. We don't know. So we did a retreat with the mayor and our entire team. And what I witnessed for that 2-3 days retreat was that we gathered all the facts after facts, what ifs after what ifs, scenarios after scenarios. Lots of tears around the road. Tears and tears and tears and tears and cries. And at the end of that retreat, it was for the collective good, for the greater good, for our future children and grandchildren, and for those people that are thinking they're going back there, the best thing we thought at the moment that should be done is to go get the funding to the government to actually demolish those buildings and compensate those people to offer them to actually move back elsewhere. So I was the lucky person that was chosen to meet with every of these people and explain to them that, well, actually the mayor announced that it was going to be demolished, but then I was negotiating the programs with the government because these people in the end, at day 3 of the tragedy, they thought they were the luckiest people on earth. They're like, well, at least at the end, I'm still alive and my building, my business is still up. But then they did not burn, so their insurance gave them 0. They were not covered, they did not burn down. These people got compensation. These did not, right? These people burnt down, and then like in many big natural catastrophes, where the insurance companies could not cover fully, public safety covered with the rest. They compensated. Well, these people, the public safety programs that existed out there were for those who actually were destroyed. So these people got nothing from their insurance, nothing from the government. So we had to go and negotiate new programs to put in place, new funding to actually help relocate these people. Not easy decision, I can guarantee you that. And then how we navigated through this, again, not supported by any research or science, just according to Marie here, is I firmly believe that I'm still here today, mentally healthy, I guess I can say, because we were surrounded by a team that were competent. When you're a leader, whatever you field, you need to be competent in your field of expertise. And it's normal that you don't know everything. If you don't know everything, in a situation where it is crucial, essential, surround yourself with people that know. Just don't take guesses. When you have to make hard decisions, make sure you can justify your decision with the right information. But it is important to be competent, and these people were. To me, resilient leadership is also about believing in your vision, believing of where we wanted to see that city become, and then to carry forward that vision despite the many roadblocks. What I've told you are only a few of them. And through all this, remain authentic. Remain authentic. People on their own way, at their own pace, will actually, eventually, in their healing process, remember a few things. And in my own experience, what they remember and appreciate the most is those who remain authentic through it all, right? Consult. This is not only in catastrophe and in crisis management. If you're in public management nowadays in 2019, 2020, your citizens, your customers, they will expect you to consult with them. Gone are the days where the administrators decide and inform their citizens. You have to make sure that they are part of the solution. We were rebuilding an entire downtown. We were rebuilding our entire heart. So we consulted with these people. Again, hundreds of different ways to consult. You'll never be able to please everybody. Some people will agree with a way, others will disagree. But the message that is important here is do consult with your people. We've managed, just a quick analogy, to gather roughly 450 citizens on a regular basis. It sounds very minimal. But when you put this relative to our entire population, we would have filled an entire Olympic Stadium of Montreal City. It's just to give you an idea. So consultations rounds were really important. And again, I mentioned, we are rebuilding this, not for ourselves. We're rebuilding the city for the future. We're building this for our children, but our grand and grand-grandchildren. So never forget about them. We went to do a round of schools. So we went to the schools and we asked the children, well, how do you actually see your future city downtown? And then if we were actually built the city of their dreams, it would have been nothing but candy stores and a huge aquarium with a big whale in the middle of it. So, but it is also very refreshing. And one last thing that I know I'm over time, but I'm done here. One thing that we realized, certainly, again, through all of this, is the strength and the resilience of children. I mean, we became the study ground of so many psychosocial studies. And then what we realized, certainly in our own experience, is that children who we were very worried for at the beginning turned out to be the more stable. When we went to see the children, they didn't seem to be affected that much. And that what we realized after time is that when they saw their parents unstable, when they saw their parents having moments of weakness, naturally those children felt that they needed to be strong. So at the beginning, we did not understand that. We were like, oh my God, like our children, like, do they just don't get it? Like, how come they're doing so good? Then as we saw the parents getting stronger, we started seeing the children getting weaker. And that's where, like a couple years after, that we started realizing that we needed to have a lot of programs to support youth at Lac Megantic. That's what I call the reconstruction of the human being. If you remember nothing but my presentation, but you remember one single thing, I beg you, this is the one. I could have got like hundreds of millions of dollars from the government, from the province, from the country, from international aids. I could have like built golden and platinum and diamond buildings and have the most beautiful, best downtown, innovative, smart city ever out there. But what good is it if I'm filling it with sick people? What good is it if I'm filling it with like people who are in post-traumatic stress disorder? What good is it if I'm filling it with people who are just sad and miss their former downtown? And I can tell you for a fact that the way our government works, again, no bad intention, tons of programs exist to rebuild infrastructure. Tons of programs exist. You go see a prime minister and you ask money to build more buildings. It's not too difficult, to be honest. You go and ask money to have a team of social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists. It's very difficult. The program is just not built this way. So again, if you remember one thing, this is the important battle. When something like this happens, think about your people. Translate that to your daily work, daily schoolwork, daily whatever. Think about the people. The infrastructure in the end is worth nothing. Just a couple pictures of how it looks today after the rebuilding. A lot of it's still empty. This is the new commercial zone. And then this is going to be the new downtown. Questions? Sorry, I took longer.
So typically we end right about now at 1 o'clock. What I'm going to suggest is that we take maybe 2 quick questions, and then we'll have to relinquish the room because I think other people...
I can stay outside though. If some people really ask like some specific questions, I have about half an hour that I can stay outside and then take all the time you want to ask me your questions.
So there will be some informal questioning afterwards, but are there 1 or 2 quick questions that we can ask now? Anybody want to be the lead? Looking around. Keith.
I'm struck by your emphasis. I'm impressed by your emphasis that you had a very strong team. Would you say that your team was exceptional, or that one could simply assume that a small community, this is a very small community, with presumably a relatively small administrative cohort, cadre, were you just lucky, or do you think that kind of quality exists everywhere?
All of the above would be my answer. I would lie if I were to say that I was lucky that we had the competency to do this at the beginning. Quite frankly, in terms of technical or how to manage this situation in particular, we didn't know. We were not trained to this and we were not experienced for that. So that we didn't have. Where I find that they were exceptional is in how resilient and how strong and how courageous. So all of the good qualities of a leader that you can think about displaying resilient leadership, then I think I got lucky. Because I firmly believe that you either have it or you don't, right? You don't necessarily learn all this that easily. So that team yes, the community was already a strong community, but I've seen its moments of weakness as well. So if it hadn't been from a strong political and administration, I think it could have ended up like much worse, to be honest.
Time for one last question. Looking around. Oh, Leo.
So you mentioned your the need to take into consideration on the expropriation, the creation of the new commercial zone. See the photos, it's starting to begin. Can you talk a little bit more on how you got buy-in from those individuals when you said, we're going to not zone you in here, but trust the long-term vision that just because you're beside this contaminated area, you won't be harmed when you didn't know?
Yeah. The buy-in, it's all about the consultation. It's all about, like, you know, it's a little bit of everything that I've mentioned about. It's about communicating properly, communicating often, remaining like authentic. Don't try to, I guess I can't say the word, starts with a B, finished with a T. Be honest with people, and then don't block them before you have potential options. And those options, make sure that you give them the opportunity to develop some of those options with you. So the buy-in, when we start like zoning out, like telling them no, we need to come up with other options very quickly. So we actually had special groups. We did consult at large, but we have like closed group with those business owners and say like, when we are going to rebuild, like, you know, like, what do you want it to look like? Like, do you prefer temporary and then move back later? Or like, so we just like made sure, again, as much as we could, not everybody wanted to take part in it. It's all dependent of like where they were in their path or in their recovery. Some people today, I would lie if there's some people today that felt like we just decided for them and they're still unhappy about the results. But then again, you will never be able to please everybody, but consult with people, involve them as much as you can in the process, and then in most of the time, in my experience, you'll end up getting their buy-in in the end. But then again, we did not do it on our own. We actually like hired specialists from all over the place. We had specialists that actually worked in the earthquake in New Zealand. That actually also had lived this before. So we consulted with them. We said, well, how did you do? Like, how did you reopen your businesses, for example, in Christchurch, New Zealand? So everywhere we could actually get information, get support, get ideas, we did.
So we're going to stop the formal questioning here. I think there will be a chance for some informal questions outside. Marie, thank you so much for coming and sharing this. I think everybody knew about the tragedy at Lac Megantic, but you've given us that personal view of what's happened, and it's hugely helpful for all of us. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.